Victoria had always prided herself on being practical and level-headed. At 32, she had a successful career as a corporate lawyer, a sleek downtown apartment, and a 5-year plan that didn't include any romantic entanglements. Love was messy and unpredictable, two qualities Victoria avoided at all costs. So when her best friend Mia begged her to be a bridesmaid in her destination wedding, Victoria was less than thrilled. A week in a tropical paradise surrounded by lovey-dovey couples and forced small talk was not her idea of a relaxing vacation. But Mia had been there for Victoria through thick and thin since college, so she grudgingly agreed. "You never know, you might meet your soulmate." Mia had gushed excitedly when Victoria accepted. Victoria had simply rolled her eyes. "The only thing I plan on meeting is the bottom of a margarita glass." Now, as Victoria stepped off the small plane onto the tarmac of a tiny Caribbean island, she took a deep breath of the warm, salty air. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. A week of sun, sand, and unlimited cocktails actually sounded pretty appealing. As she made her way through the small open-air airport to collect her luggage, Victoria's eyes were drawn to a man standing near the baggage carousel. He was tall and athletically built, with tousled dark hair and a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a striking blue-green that reminded her of the tropical waters surrounding the island. Victoria quickly looked away when she realized she was staring. "Get it together," she chided herself. "You're here for Mia's wedding, not to ogle random attractive strangers." She grabbed her suitcase and headed for the exit, where shuttle buses were waiting to take guests to the resort. As she approached the line, she heard a deep voice behind her. "Excuse me, I think you dropped this." Victoria turned to see the handsome stranger from the baggage claim holding out her phone. "Oh, thank you, I didn't even realize," she said, taking the phone from him. Their fingers brushed for just a moment, sending an unexpected jolt through her. He flashed her a warm smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "No problem. I'm Aiden, by the way." "Victoria," she replied, finding herself smiling back despite her usual reserved nature. "Nice to meet you, Victoria. Are you here for the Hunter Chen wedding too?" She nodded. "Yes, I'm one of the bridesmaids. How do you know the couple?" "I went to college with the groom. We were roommates freshman year," Aiden explained. "Small world, huh?" Before Victoria could respond, the shuttle driver called for the next group to board. She and Aiden ended up seated next to each other for the short ride to the resort. Victoria found herself relaxing as they chatted easily about their travels and what had brought them to the island. Aiden, she learned, was a marine biologist who split his time between field research and teaching at a university. His easygoing charm and quick wit had Victoria laughing more than she had in months. When they arrived at the resort, she was almost disappointed that the ride was over. "Well, I'm sure I'll see you around this week," Aiden said as they collected their bags. "Save me a dance at the reception?" Victoria felt a flutter in her stomach at his hopeful expression. "I'll think about it," she replied with a coy smile. As she watched Aiden walk away, Victoria shook her head at herself. What was she doing? She wasn't here to flirt or start any kind of vacation fling. She needed to focus on being there for Mia and enjoying some relaxation. But as the week went on, Victoria found it increasingly difficult to stick to that plan. She kept running into Aiden, at the pool, on the beach, at group dinners. Each time, she found herself drawn into long conversations that left her smiling and looking forward to their next encounter. There was just something about him that put her at ease. Unlike most men she met, Aiden didn't seem intimidated by her professional success or try to impress her with macho posturing. He was genuinely interested in her thoughts and experiences, asking insightful questions and sharing his own passions. Victoria learned that beneath his laid-back exterior, Aiden had a brilliant scientific mind and a deep commitment to ocean conservation. His eyes lit up as he described his current research on coral reef restoration. She found his enthusiasm infectious. For his part, Aiden was captivated by Victoria's sharp wit and a hidden playful side. He loved drawing out her dry sense of humor and seeing the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed. There was a depth and complexity to her that he longed to explore further. As the wedding day approached, Victoria realized with a start that she was developing real feelings for Aiden. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She hadn't opened her heart to anyone in years, not since her college boyfriend had shattered it. The idea of being vulnerable again was daunting, but there was no denying the way her pulse quickened whenever Aiden was near, or how she found herself seeking him out at every opportunity. She knew she was in trouble when she caught herself daydreaming about what it would be like to kiss him. The night before the wedding, the whole group gathered for a bonfire on the beach. Victoria sat next to Aiden on a log, hyper-aware of how close their bodies were. As everyone chatted and laughed around them, she felt like they were in their own little bubble. "Want to take a walk?" Aiden asked softly, nodding towards the moonlit shoreline. Victoria hesitated for just a moment before nodding. They slipped away from the group, strolling side by side along the water's edge. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of waves and the distant strains of music from the resort. "I can't believe the week is almost over," Aiden said, breaking the comfortable silence. "It's gone by so fast." "I know," Victoria agreed. "I have to admit, I wasn't looking forward to this trip at first, but it's been unexpectedly wonderful." She glanced at him shyly. Aiden stopped walking and turned to face her. "I'm really glad I met you, Victoria," he said softly. "I've never connected with someone so quickly before." Victoria's heart was racing. "I feel the same way," she admitted, "but I'm not sure what happens next. We live on opposite sides of the country, and I'm not really the long-distance relationship type." "Neither am I," Aiden said, "but I also know that I'm not ready to just say goodbye and never see you again." He reached out and took her hand, sending tingles up her arm. "Maybe we don't have to figure it all out tonight. Can we just enjoy the time we have left?" Victoria nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Aiden's other hand came up to gently cup her cheek. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. When their lips finally met, it was soft and sweet at first, but it quickly deepened into something more passionate as days of building tension finally found release. Victoria wound her arms around Aiden's neck, pressing her body flush against his. His hands slid down to her waist, holding her close. They broke apart after several long moments, both breathing heavily. Aiden rested his forehead against hers. "Wow," he whispered. Victoria let out a breathless laugh. "Yeah, wow is right." They spent the rest of the night talking and kissing under the stars, reluctant to let the magical evening end. When they finally returned to the resort in the early hours of the morning, Victoria felt like she was floating on air. But as the high of the night faded, doubt and anxiety began to creep in. What was she thinking, getting so caught up in a vacation romance? This wasn't who she was. She didn't do impulsive or reckless, or she had worked hard to build the life she wanted. Was she really willing to potentially upend it all for a man she'd only known a week? These thoughts plagued her as she got ready for the wedding the next day. She avoided Aiden at the ceremony, focusing on her duties as a bridesmaid. But she couldn't help stealing glances at him, looking devastatingly handsome in his suit. At the reception, Victoria tried to lose herself in celebration for her friend, but her eyes kept being drawn to Aiden across the room. When their gazes finally met, the longing she saw there made her breath catch. Before she could overthink it, Victoria marched across the dance floor to where Aiden stood. "I believe I owe you a dance," she said, holding out her hand. Aiden's face lit up as he took her hand and led her onto the floor. As they swayed together to the music, Victoria felt all her doubts and fears melting away. Being in Aiden's arms just felt right. "I've been thinking," she said, looking up at him. "Maybe we're approaching this all wrong. Instead of worrying about the future, we should focus on the present, on getting to know each other better and seeing where this goes." Aiden's eyes shone with hope. "I'd like that," he said. "A lot." "Me too," Victoria replied with a soft smile. She laid her head on his shoulder, content to stay in this moment for as long as possible. The next morning, Victoria and Aiden said goodbye at the airport with promises to talk soon. As her plane took off, Victoria felt a mix of excitement and trepidation about what the future might hold. But for once in her life, she was willing to embrace the unknown. Over the next few months, Victoria and Aiden's relationship deepened through nightly phone calls, long text conversations, and occasional weekend visits. They discovered they had even more in common than they'd realized: a shared love of obscure documentaries, a competitive streak when it came to trivia nights, a secret soft spot for cheesy 80s power ballads. But they also had their differences. Aiden was more spontaneous and free-spirited, while Victoria liked structure and planning. He thrived on new experiences and adventure, while she found comfort in routine. There were times when these contrasts led to friction or misunderstandings, yet they both found that their differences actually complemented each other well. Aiden helped Victoria loosen up and embrace life's surprises. She helped ground him and think more about the future. Together, they struck a balance that brought out the best in both of them. As the months went by, they began discussing more serious plans for the future. The distance was difficult, but they were committed to making it work. They alternated visits to each other's cities, getting to know their respective lives and friend groups. Victoria was surprised to find herself seriously considering a cross-country move to be with Aiden. It went against everything in her carefully crafted life plan, but she was beginning to realize that some things were worth upending your life for. Still, doubts lingered. Was she really ready to leave behind her hard-earned career and support system for a relationship that was still relatively new? What if things didn't work out and she was left starting over from scratch in a new city? These fears came to a head during one of Aiden's visits to her. They had just returned from a nice dinner out and were relaxing on Victoria's couch. Aiden had been quieter than usual all evening, seeming distracted and nervous. "Is everything okay?" Victoria asked, concerned. "You've seemed off all night." Aiden took a deep breath. "Actually, there's something I wanted to talk to you about." He shifted to face her more fully on the couch. "I've been offered an amazing research opportunity. It's a 2-year project studying the effects of climate change on marine ecosystems in Australia." Victoria felt her stomach drop. "Oh," she said softly, wow, congratulations. When would you leave?" "In about 3 months," Aiden replied. He reached out to take her hand. "But here's the thing, I don't want to go without you. Victoria, I love you. These past months have shown me that what we have is special. I don't want to lose it." Victoria's mind was reeling. "Are you asking me to move to Australia with you?" she asked incredulously. Aiden nodded. "I know it's a huge ask, and I'll understand if you're not ready for that kind of commitment, but I had to at least put it out there. You're the most incredible woman I've ever met, Victoria. I want to build a life with you, wherever that may be." Victoria was silent for a long moment, trying to process everything. Part of her wanted to immediately say yes, to throw caution to the wind and embark on this grand adventure with the man she loved. But the practical side of her brain was screaming in protest. It was too much, too fast. How could she give up everything she'd worked for to follow a man halfway around the world? What would happen when the project ended in 2 years? I don't know what to say," she finally managed. "This is a lot to take in. I need some time to think." Aiden's face fell slightly, but he nodded in understanding. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I don't expect an answer right away." The next few weeks were agonizing for Victoria as she weighed her options. She made pro-con lists, sought advice from friends and family, and spent many sleepless nights imagining different scenarios. In the end, it came down to one simple question. Could she imagine her life without Aiden in it? The answer, she realized, was a resounding no. With shaking hands, she dialed Aiden's number. When he answered, she took a deep breath and said, "Yes, let's do it. Let's move to Australia together." Aiden's whoop of joy made her laugh. As they began excitedly discussing plans, Victoria felt a sense of lightness and possibility she'd never experienced before. For the first time in her life, she was following her heart instead of her head, and it felt absolutely right. The next few months were a whirlwind of preparations, selling furniture, subletting apartments, obtaining visas, saying goodbyes. There were moments of panic and doubt, but Victoria pushed through them. She reminded herself that sometimes the scariest choices lead to the greatest rewards. Finally, the day of their departure arrived. As Victoria boarded the plane hand in hand with Aiden, she felt a mix of nerves and exhilaration. She had no idea what challenges and adventures awaited them in Australia, But she knew that as long as they faced them together, they could handle anything. As the plane took off, Victoria looked out the window at the shrinking cityscape below. She thought about how much her life had changed in just 1 year, how a chance encounter on a tropical island had led her here, about to start a whole new chapter on the other side of the world. She turned to Aiden beside her, seeing her own excitement and love reflected in his eyes. Whatever happened next, Victoria knew one thing for certain. Taking a leap of faith had never felt so right.